So movements are a combination of width as the kingdom expands, but also depth as that fruit matures. In this episode, we're going to talk with Kenny Fong about how to balance the two. Coming up. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the H3X Podcast. And in this episode, we're going to talk with Kenny Fong, a movement leader. He's based in Mauritius, but working all across Africa. He's going to share a story with us as he has begun to pursue work among Muslims, and then also just talk about this balance of width and depth and how they have worked out balancing the two in pursuing a movement that tries to fulfill the call of the Great Commission, but also doing that in a way that is pursuing what does this look like to do church health and to model the way of being Jesus church to church, country to country, all across Africa. Here's Kenny. I want you, Kenny, to just kind of introduce yourself, share about where you're working, and then we'll talk about what you're learning.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's been a great week, right?
Yeah.
And getting to finally meet face to face after talking for so long. So my name is Kenny, and I am from the island of Mauritius. And so a little bit of myself. So growing up, I was very comfortable financially. You know, my parents always gave us the best of everything. But as a kid, I was very needy. And so I didn't want any of those things. I just wanted my parents to be there. And so not having that in the home, so I went to seek, love and affection on the street. And so from a very early age, messing with the wrong crowd, alcohol, drugs, girls, seeking meaning, seeking love, seeking, just being appreciated, but always felt void and mistaken and misunderstood. And so at the age of 21, right after college, well, we call that university, I asked myself, what good is to live if it's just going to be the same thing over and over, not having peace, not having joy, and feeling empty. So I tried to kill myself a few times. And fast forward, a few years later, my family used to own a restaurant. And so a man walked to me, and he was a regular in that restaurant, and he asked to pray for me, and I found it really weird. But soon after, he invited me over to his place where he shared Jesus with me, and that was the turning point where I realized that I've been seeking all these things, into people, but only God can provide peace, joy, and love. And so I surrendered my life to Jesus. He healed me from depression. And from day one, I've been wanting to know more and what it actually means to walk with Him. And so fast forward, that guy was not from the island. And so he was a businessman. And so he left after 3 weeks, discipling me from his home every night.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, I went to church because he left, and 3 months through, a man walks to the church, and he was preaching, and right after service, he came up to me and said, "Hey, you're new here." I said, "Yeah." And so he started talking to me about making disciples and what it actually means to obey Jesus. And at that time, I was so hungry for Jesus that I was at the prayer meeting, the cell group, the men's meeting, the Bible study, the church service, everything. And so that man says, "Come over, let's study the Bible and look what it means to be a disciple." So I said, yes. So he got me into those principles of what Jesus was teaching his disciple. And so we started obeying, and within the 6th first week, we've seen hundreds of people reached with the gospel.
Wow.
We've seen 40 people baptized. 4 groups started where we were teaching people to obey. And my mind was blown away because I was just a brand new believer. And I was just trying to be obedient because I love what Jesus did in my life. So I wanted others to know that.
Yeah.
So that's been my journey. Like I've been discipling from the very get-go into those principles of disciple making.
That's amazing. Well, I would love for you to share some of the key things you've been learning. I'll tee it up with this first question and story, and then you go from there. But you were sharing with me this story before we hit record about some movement leaders that you were meeting with, and then you asked one of them to take you to a mosque and show you how to engage with the imam. And so I know we'll have many listeners and viewers from many different backgrounds, and I know a lot of people who are wanting to engage Muslims and see, they have a huge heart to see that happen. Could you share that story?
Sure.
And what you learned?
So last week, Mauritius is part of Africa. And so last week we were in Nairobi together with other movement leaders. And there was this guy who the Lord has used in mighty ways in Southeast Asia and many different parts of the world, really engaging Muslim. And so it was just a blessing to have him there in Nairobi. Wow. Because a brother of mine was saying, you know, the missing gap to finish the work in Africa is to get to Islam. So we get our guys confident to share with Muslim. We can see the bridge, like we will reach the gap. And so we are praying and focusing, how can we equip disciples and church planters into engaging boldly Muslims.
Wow.
And so that brother was there, and so since he was there, you know, I asked him, hey, would you model for me what it looks like to go and engage in a mosque with the imam? Because I've heard and read a lot about his methods and what God has used. And so I said, sure. So I took my phone, Google mosque on Google Map. And so he was scrolling and he was looking for the biggest mosque. Wow. And so we hit the mosque, knocks on the door.
Did he say why he was looking for the biggest mosque?
Yeah, so as we were heading to the mosque, I was like, this is exciting. And I said, okay, what's your game plan? What are we trying to establish there?
Yeah.
So it says two things I want to happen. First, I want the imam to recognize that the Bible has not been corrupted and that it's okay to get some guys to read the Bible. So once we establish that with the imam, because the imam is the authority of the mosque, right?
Right.
Once we establish and we get that with the imam, so I want to go back and get guys to engage people within the community who are Muslim to say, hey, let's get in the word because the imam said it was okay to read the Bible.
Yeah.
I was like, this is awesome. And so we knock on the door of the mosque, and the security guy shows up and says, yes. And says, we're here to ask the imam some questions. So, okay. So walks into the mosque, and the imam was not so sure what was going on, you know. And so we sat down, and basically he said, you know, I'm a teacher, and I teach.
This is your friend, the movement leader, saying this. Yeah.
He's saying to the imam, I'm a teacher, and I teach people from different churches, and I try to get them to speak to Muslim friends because we want them to have friendly conversation. So, but I'm also a learner. I'm a student of the Quran, and so I've been trying to read the Quran. Can you help me out? Because every time I tell my students to go to talk to Muslim, and I myself, the movement leader said that I myself, Muslim people would say that the Bible has been changed. And so, is that true? Because I can't find it in the Quran. So that got the imam off guard. And so long story short, he left after a few minutes and says, I'll come back. And then he came back with two other guys, and he gave a business card that says, call this person. This is the guy that you really want to talk to. He's a scholar. And so by the end of, I think we talked for like an hour back and forth.
Yeah.
And the imam was really happy. And he said, yeah, I would love to have my guys and come and talk to your guys. And he even walked us all the way to our vehicle and said, I'm looking forward for your call.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. And so the movement leader like encouraged us, those who were staying behind in Nairobi. He said, hey, you got to go back and tell them that the imam was okay for us to read the Bible.
Wow.
And so that was incredible to see, for him to model that boldness and the humility of coming to our neighbors.
Wow.
And say, hey, let's talk about that.
Wow.
So that's been fun. And so quick overview of what we've been learning over the years. So right now, I have the privilege of seeing other co-laborers working throughout the whole continent of Africa.
Yeah.
And trying to segment, because Africa is such a big continent.
Yes.
And so by the grace of God, God has been raising men and women in different places. And right now we're seeing the Lord appoint indigenous leaders from all over Africa taking responsibility and having a vision to reach of all of Africa.
Wow.
And so with the simple tools of what we've been learning, the same biblical pattern of Jesus and the apostles that we see in the gospel and in the book of Acts,
right,
and being passed on to the next generation. So it's pretty neat to see that that boldness and that faithfulness and obedience to Jesus. And so one brother who's very dear to me in West Africa said, you know what? Our political leaders have failed us. Our church leaders have failed us. But I think it's a time for us, movement leaders, to really model what it looks to be church with one another, and what it would take for us to reach all of Africa with the gospel of Christ. And so that statement speaks boldly to me, because everything that we do is a model, right?
Yes.
And so what I've been learning over the years is, first, we represent Christ, so we're modeling Christ in every aspect of our lives, relationship, discipleship, how we engage with our neighbors and our communities. Everything is about modeling Christ. And other things that we've been learning, that nobody is really ready to do what we do. And it's like, for sure, this is not something that we woke up one morning and said, hey, let's reach all of Africa.
Right.
It's been like a journey of learning and failing and learning, growing through those hard, experiences. And it's really being faithful in the small things, like the small step of obedience. Like, what does it look like to reach out my community, and from that community to the region, to the country. And now, we have guys all over the place, bouncing from one place, training and discipling people across the board. And so it didn't start like we had a game plan. It really started with simple step of obedience and being faithful along the way, trying to be obedient. So what else we've been learning is just to see being intentional with one another, being intentional in our the way we do things. For example, that has been very encouraging to me personally. We all know that Africa has a bad reputation to be poor and to always have needs all over the place.
Yeah.
And so what being with the intentionality of making it right, looking at biblical patterns and biblical commands, and how can we model that. So money has been a big issue in Africa. So one pretty neat thing that we're seeing by being intentional is encouraging leaders to address the money issue. Like, for example, I'll give you in DRC, there was a brother whose house took fire, and and one of the leaders says, "Hey, pray for my disciple. His house burned out," and it was really sad. And he showed a video of his house burning down, and says, "Please pray for him." And so, on the WhatsApp group, everybody was like sending prayer emoji. We're praying for you, brother. We stand with you.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, that's our brother. How can we do more than just pray?" And so, talking to a few guys, and this is indigenous leaders across Africa, we were able to put money together and send some people from the house church down there to go build his house.
Wow.
And so that was like, the church.
It's a huge deal.
Like the church in Africa helping that local church in that community with that brother. So there are various examples of this where, we like last year COVID hit pretty hard and people were suffering, people were hurting, and many thousands didn't have food. So we asked whoever can give, whatever you can give. And so last year we were able to feed in Mauritius, for example, 70 families for 2 months. And it was like out of nothing. We didn't have much.
Wow.
And even some people who had like just one pack of beans, they gave it away.
Wow.
Because they were urgent need. And so that was a very good opportunity to display Christ, but also with the principle of always seeking out to make disciples.
Wow.
In everything we're doing.
Wow.
So these were, a few lessons along the way that I personally have been learning, and it's been an incredible journey, and I think we're just getting started.
Wow. I want to just reiterate back to you some things I just heard you say that has really been helpful just as you're talking, and I love that you talk about you started with a vision that God gave you, and then it expanded.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when people talk about big vision or having big vision, they think it all starts with like they've got it all, the whole coloring book filled in, so to speak, or it's all there. But what you're saying, I think, is really key. You started with what you could see and where you were, and then you were faithful with that. And then God gave you a bigger vision. That's key, right?
So, like I always encourage our guys, any brother, sister, be faithful in the little things.
Wow.
Put the boots to the ground and let's just plow the field. That's what we're called to do.
Wow.
Whatever comes out of it, it's not up to us.
Wow.
We got to be faithful to that, though. That's what we're called to do.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you brought up there that I just want to highlight and dig into a little more is you talked about the intentionality. And I think sometimes one of the critiques of disciple-making movements is width, but an inch deep.
Mm-hmm.
And here you're talking about the vast width of Africa and so many different people groups and languages and a lot to it. But at the same time, being intentional when you have a brother that's got a critical issue, that this is not just about, pray for your brother, let's keep making disciples, but that you're pursuing not just the width, but depth of relationships and depth of kingdom and church health as well.
Sure. We get a lot of those critics,
Yeah.
And I think, this is where I think across the spectrum of the DMM, CPM, we're doing a great job loving God.
Yeah.
And making disciple. But I think we need to be more intentional about how do we transmit loving others better.
Yes.
And so that's been a huge learning curve for us. And it still is, because loving others is really, really hard. And what does it look like in our community? And sometimes you want to change the whole, like, you want to address a big issue across the board, but what does it look like with your wife and kids? How does it look like to love and address that with simple steps?
That's so good, Kenny. And I think we've been talking about this week a little bit, that there can be this fear sometimes that when I start to meet people's needs and pursue loving people, that you can have mission drift, so to speak, where I'm no longer focused on the main thing of making disciples and is this going to become a social program. And But you talked a little bit about as we are pursuing being a representative of Christ, still holding the discipleship and all of that. Can you speak a little more to that piece?
Sure. I think, for those who are more accustomed with the full fields framework, right? And we often think, we're just going to go, prayer walk, find people of peace, share the gospel, get them into discipleship groups, and then get them to church formation and, develop leaders for this. I think feel free is much more deeper than just getting the commands of Christ, whatever. It's actually a lifelong discipleship where you really want them to obey Jesus in every aspect of their life.
Amen.
And so loving others, I think it's discipleship, like the whole intentionality of, discipling and walking and coaching people.
Yeah.
You got to identify those things and feel free and say, that's a discipleship issue that we need to go deep down with people. And then as the church is formed, I think it's also good as a community to start having eyes to see where the kingdom is not, but also see the suffering and the need that is in the community, and how can we be an agent of change, right? And so obviously the apostle will always bounce, you will go back to field 1 and find new places to hop, but as the church, how can we be intentional and be also those who will stay behind to be loving others? And I think the whole process about loving others, it's all about finding people of peace. Right? You genuinely want to love on people, and at the end of the day, it's all about how can I find person of peace. And so I think a dear brother to us said that yesterday. It's not about those programs and those what could become mission drifts. It's all about who we are. We are disciples, and disciples make disciples, and we plant churches, and that's who we are. But I think on the other side, if we were coming from a place of, let's just try to do social work, let's just try to do community stuff, and not having the gospel DNA of what a disciple is, it changes everything.
It does. So,
but when you have the right DNA of who a disciple is and what he does, wherever you want to put him, you put him on an airplane, you want to put him on a ship, you want to put him in the village.
Amen.
He will make disciple and plant churches wherever he is. And that's the whole thing. I think we need to get the DNA of what is a disciple and what a disciple does. If you get this right, wherever you put him, he will make disciple and plant churches.
Amen. Good word. I want to put you on the spot, and you can not want to answer this if you don't want to, but I know your heart is for unity in Africa, and you were sharing just about some of the barriers to that. Can speak into that as much as you want, and then what would be your prayer for unity across Africa?
Wow, that's a tough question. The barriers, I think, obviously, I think I look young. It is a challenge, Mm-hmm. It is a challenge in Africa, and I come from the harvest. I don't have credentials, I don't have any titles, so a lot of times, that can be a barrier for, getting more people engaged in disciple making, and so it is what it is. There's the cultural environment that we're in, and I think bottom line, it's just trying to be faithful, and I'm glad you asked this question as well, because I was just having lunch with another movement leader this morning, and whenever there's like movement leaders, I just love to sit with them and just ask questions and really learn from each other. And he was saying something that really cut me to the heart this morning. He said, in leadership, it's all about serving. And so that's all you want to do. So if you want to see unity, serve them. Even if they don't want to invite you in whatever, serve them.
That's good and convicting.
So I think, it was convicting to me that, I think leadership starts by serving others.
Wow.
And I understand the challenge. It's been like this for many, many generations, but we trust by just, again, doing the work, serving one another, bearing with one another, will get us to see that perfect unity for the whole world to know about Jesus. And so I think it's modeling again.
Yeah.
Not because it's not this way that it doesn't need to be this way. So it has to be modeled. So just trying to be a model and just trying to learn along the way, what would Jesus do, and just being humble. And so I haven't figured it out. So I think I'll take this word that just serving them, and I think they will really see Jesus, and they will see what he's up to, and hopefully they will want to jump on the wave of what God is doing.
Amen. Any final thoughts you want to share?
Well, it's been a fun talk, and I know there's a lot of friends back home and all across Africa that they're watching your show, and so final thoughts, I would say, keep doing what you're doing. Amen. You're gonna get better at it, and let's keep pressing on until everybody knows about Jesus.